Today I'll be reviewing Tales of Berseria, a 2016 JRPG released by Bandai Namco in their long-running Tales of series of games. This is not my first Tales of game. I played 3 Tales of games before this: Tales of the Abyss, Tales of Xillia, and Tales of Vesperia. Now, Tales of Berseria is a game that I would call average to above average overall, but it has enough unique things going for it that I did enjoy the experience of playing and beating it, and I wanted to describe in a review what those unique things are and why they work well. So first and foremost, this game, like other Tales games, spends a lot of time telling its story in cutscenes and skits between the characters in your party, and it's a little bit of a double-edged sword watching all of that content in that you'll find a few important bits of plot detail and character backgrounds that tie into the story in those scenes, but not all of it is essential. I would say most of it is not essential, and there's a lot of sort of pointless banter between the characters about things that don't really matter that much. And you'll have to sit through all of that if you want to get to the good little tidbits of information that are actually relevant to the story and the characters.
I don't mean how she looked.
So that's not news to anybody who plays Tales games. What is different, though, about this game is that it takes a different approach to the moral perspectives of its characters, and it kind of flips upside down the conventions of good and evil in video games. We always expect to be playing as the protagonists who are always good, and that we're always going to be fighting against an evil villain who does nasty bad things. Now in Tales of Berseria, that convention is upset in that you play an anti-hero of sorts, Velvet, who is out for vengeance. That's really the only goal she has. That's the only thing driving her through the game. And it's a fascinating thing to watch because there aren't many other games that just go full on into vengeance as a theme and explore what that does to a character's psyche. Because it's your main character who's going through that, we get a pretty thorough exploration of the theme of vengeance. That alone makes this game a pretty fascinating play. Now, one thing I really like about the way Tales of Berseria portrays vengeance as a theme is that it does not evaluate the actions of Velvet or the antagonists as good or evil. It leaves things very much in a sort of gray area and takes you on this crazy quest for vengeance in which a lot of things happen, and it just leaves you to make up your own mind, to draw your own conclusions about who's in the wrong, who's in the right. Was it good to go on this long quest of vengeance? You make your own mind up about that. And I love games that leave moral questions open like that and don't hit you over the head with a clear answer, because that's the way real life is more often than not. And games that reflect real life's complexity tend to be more rich and rewarding to play through. I would describe the main theme of Tales of Berseria as a question, and that question is, do or do not the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? And extending that, is it or is it not just to sacrifice one individual for the good of society or all people? That question is addressed very personally for the main character you play as in this game. And without spoiling anything, I'll just say that she ends up going on a long journey of vengeance, for better or for worse, because her feelings are just that strong. There is some character development along the way, though. Velvet for sure experiences a degree of character development and changes a little bit as she goes on this journey, and 1 or 2 characters in her party also experience some character development. However, I'll say that about half of your party is composed of rather static characters that essentially stay exactly the same throughout the journey of the game. And that's okay as well, because here's another thing that real life has: both people who don't change and people who do change.
You're human.
One last thing I want to note about the characters in this game is just how fun the character designs are, particularly on the protagonist side. All the playable and non-playable characters that you ally with throughout this game are quite amusing and interesting. And by the end of the game, you'll be traveling with what seems like just a circus show of freaks. And I love that. There's a headless guy, a headless blacksmith guy. There's a lizard man. There's just a lot of diversity, and it's fun to witness that. I would describe the gameplay of Tales of Berseria as three-pronged in nature.
What the hell is this pot?
One thing you'll spend a lot of time doing is just viewing a lot of story cutscenes that explain what's going on in the game.
Is there something
A second thing you'll do a lot of is traversing environments and exploring them a little bit to get to where you need to go to advance events of the game. And the third thing you'll do a decent amount of is combat. And the combat is pretty well handled in this game, like it is in most Tales games. It's a fluid and fun action RPG system that has a pretty good degree of customizability, so you can play how you want to. It just works very well. You take 4 characters into battle in this game, and you can also choose which character you control. And different characters will have differing capacities for offense or defense or healing, but I just stuck with Velvet, the main character, for my whole playthrough because she seemed to have a really fun moveset and a lot of great combos that were a blast to use. It seems like different characters do have slightly different abilities and movesets, but there's not so much difference that you'll have a ton of trouble switching between different characters. The game spends a lot of time throwing little tutorials at you. It tries to break up the tutorials and pace the tutorial content by giving you just one here and there after a battle, every other battle, but the result of that is I was 25 to 30 hours into this game and still seeing an occasional tutorial, which was a little annoying. But you don't need to pay super close attention to the tutorials, because for one thing, you can access them in the menu to review them anytime you need to brush up on mechanics of the game. And a second thing is that the gameplay in battle is not so complex and difficult that you really need to master the mechanics of the battle system. Essentially, you can kind of just feel your way through the battles and to a large extent button mash and find a lot of success. That's kind of what I did most of my playthrough, and I actually think it's sort of a good thing that I can do that, because it means this game's easy to pick up and play and it's approachable. There is more depth there to explore, it's just not necessarily required, unless you're playing on a harder difficulty. And that's another thing to note. I played on just the average or normal default difficulty, and I did find the game pretty easy. Didn't get too many game overs. It wasn't challenged too much, but there is more challenge there for someone who wants it if you choose a higher difficulty. I just started with normal because I like to do that my first time through any game. Just like any other Tales game, there are lots of arts to use in battle, and they're pretty flashy and fun to use. The different arts have elements associated with them, and you'll have to pay attention to enemy weaknesses to particular elements, and that whole strategic aspect of the game works well. Also, the damage you can do is highly dependent on how good and quick you are at linking together combos and pressing the trigger buttons to use advanced mystic arts and things that deal a lot of damage. If you get the combat flowing really good and fast, you'll find that you can deal a lot of damage quickly. Like in many other JRPGs, your party has equipment to manage, lots of weapons and armor to equip. Maybe even a little too much. I found myself having to spend a lot of time in menus updating and swapping out equipment to the things that I most recently acquired to make sure my characters weren't falling behind. in strength. You do have to stay on top of your character level and equipment in this game, or you might find yourself struggling against some of the bosses you have to fight at a few different points. Basically, I didn't have to level grind too much, but I did have to make sure I kind of fought a few enemies in every environment and made sure I was able to dispatch those enemies easily before I got to a boss in a given environment. That's kind of a good signal that you need to spend a little more time fighting and leveling up in this game, finding that you're struggling to beat even the easiest enemies you're running into as you traverse environments. There are no random encounters in this game. Instead, enemies will appear as monsters that you'll see and have to avoid as you're just traversing around. I do like that because it lets you avoid battles more easily if you want to. Although it is kind of annoying how densely these monsters are packed in a few spots, and it is kind of hard to avoid them in those areas. Now, one thing I have to draw special attention to in this game's combat is that it has great customization of your combos. It lets you decide what art you're going to have every face button on the PlayStation controller trigger and in what order. And you can basically customize and craft your art combos to have any sequence of like 4 arts, one after the other. And that offers a lot of flexibility to the combat, and it's really fun to mess with and makes a huge impact for certain boss fights, depending on what the boss is weak to. So that's really fun. I always applaud any high degree of customizability in RPGs, because in my opinion, that is a defining trait of RPGs. Customizability, letting you fine-tune the way you play so that your playthrough is going to be a very individual experience that suits your style. Now, there are a few elements of the gameplay in this game that are not as important and arguably dispensable. Things like the cooking, which allows any character in your party to whip up a dish using ingredients you have on hand, and then that dish gives your party battle bonuses. I did it a few times. I did cook a few times, but I didn't feel the bonuses I was gaining were really necessary to beat any enemy in this game, at least on the normal difficulty. Perhaps if I played it on a harder difficulty, then these things would be more valuable. There are also expeditions, where you'll send a ship of pirates who have really no other purpose or function in the game to go explore some place and bring back loot. And the loot is helpful. It's very similar to what you can do in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 with the mercenary missions, but just kind of an annoying thing to manage. Your expeditions will constantly be coming back to you, and you'll need to send them out again. It's just sort of an annoying thing. There are a few other cool things you can do with your character customization. One is fashion accessories that have no purpose tied to battle. They just change the appearance of your characters. And if you put these accessories on them, they will display them in story cutscenes. And that was pretty fun. So I made Velvet wear a top hat and eyeglasses, and I made one of the most morally upright characters in my party wear a pirate eye patch to make her look like a villain just for fun. I gave one a pair of aviators that really suited him well. Another character I gave a cowboy hat, and it just fit. So you can have fun with that. I did. I love games that allow you to have fun with fashion. It's always a good time. Another cool little thing is that Tales of Berseria has titles that characters can go by, and these titles confer battle bonuses. They're not just, they're not merely monikers, and that's kind of neat. Regarding the game's exploration and environmental traversal, there isn't too much to report. What I do have to say is that Tales of Berseria unfortunately demands a little too much backtracking and traversing through the same environments over and over again. It just got a little old. because I was asked to go to the same location like 5 to 10 times, and it just would have been a lot quicker, more convenient, and preferred if after the first 2 or 3 times I could have fast traveled to that point. The game does have items you can use that allow fast travel, but the problem is at multiple points you'll be denied the ability to use these items because the game will want you to manually backtrack through a certain place because there's a story cutscene it's waiting to trigger in that place. So that got kind of annoying, and it'll get more annoying for someone who's playing this game and just skipping all the story cutscenes. And I could see a few people wanting to do that. One criticism of the traversal is that there's no overworld in this game in the way there is in certain older JRPGs like Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy VIII or Golden Sun. Instead, you'll just select locations from a menu just kind of showing the entire world of the game, and then you'll just see a little dot, if anything, of like a ship moving through the ocean, and then you'll appear where you're going. I always do like overworlds in my JRPGs because I think they enhance the immersion and feeling like you're in this world traveling somewhere, but to other people, overworld traversal could be a waste of time, so depends on who you are whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I do need to warn some people who are not really accustomed to JRPGs and their pacing that the story is told kind of slowly.
I'm still doing
so
right.
At multiple points in the middle of the game, you might be on your way to some specific location where you think you're about to do something important, but wait, then something happened over here and now we need to go help that person. That kind of thing. So expect interruptions throughout the journey. Being derailed from your main quest is quite a common thing in JRPGs, and this game is no exception. There's a little bit of light puzzle solving as you explore the environments, but it's very simple. It almost always boils down to just going and activating some switch or magical equivalent of a switch, and then a door somewhere else will open. You'll find the door, go through that, and do the same thing in a new area, usually. Puzzle solving was a little primitive, but primitive is better than frustrating. One cool little touch is that there are some barriers that you can just kick down, whether it's a boulder or a cracked wall. Velvet can just deliver a super strong sidekick and kick it down. And there's something really satisfying about doing that. It's a simple thing to do, but something satisfying about it. Something a little cathartic. Now, as you traverse these environments and occasionally backtrack through them, you might start to feel that some of these environments are a little too large to traverse and a little too empty or boring to make that traversal fun. And Tales of Berseria remedies this, or tries to, by giving you this hoverboard thing. It's what I can best describe it as. It's kind of like a snowboard, but it just hovers. And you can use this to speed up your traversal of any environment only after you find this arbitrary little wisp of magical energy that you have to find in every area before you can use it. Honestly, the way they handled this was a little lame, a little strange, and I kind of feel like the inclusion of this hoverboard is just an admittance that these environments are too big and boring to move through on foot. So one could argue that the hoverboard never should have been necessary, and the fact it's there is an indication the environments have a little problem. Moving into the visuals, I have a soft compliment to give to Tales of Berseria, in that I do think its environments are pretty to look at. There's a good amount of diversity to them. You'll find snowy places, lush places, a few seaside locations. They were fun enough, but not as good as other JRPGs I've played, and not as good as something like Dark Souls. These environments are not quite that detailed, but They're colorful and vibrant, and they suit a JRPG. There were a few standout locations where I did pause just to look around at things in the distance, so I do have to compliment the game for those moments. Sound effects were also pretty strong. There were a lot of awesome battle sound effects. I think the audio is also good to above average. The music doesn't stand out a ton to me. It's kind of the sort of soundtrack that is very tied to the cinematics of the game, so it's scored to move with the way the scenes unfold, and there aren't a lot of really memorable repetitive themes. It's more like film music.
If you can accomplish that, it takes strength, real strength, and I'm curious where it comes from.
It's kind of contemporary classical in style.
Is that so wrong?
I would describe the music as low-profile cinematic orchestration.
It's built to function even if the ship is rolling.
Velvet!
The composer is Motoi Sakuraba, who's a great composer. I just don't think this is one of his best soundtracks. It's still good, though. And it does have a piano theme here or there that heighten the emotions of certain scenes. I think the strongest aspect of this game's audio is actually the voice acting. For a Tales of game that relies so much on its story and character interactions, voice acting becomes more important. And I think all of the roles are handled well in this game. I can't think of a single character that I came across whose voice didn't fit or I really wanted to be changed. There was one character in the party, a witch character, who had kind of an annoying high-pitched voice that was sort of shrill, but it fit.
I'm starting to see why they wanted to execute you.
Even if you have sort of a negative reaction to a character's voice and personality, that can still indicate a well-done voice acting performance. Any reaction is better than no reaction. So how do I feel about Tales of Berseria at the end of the day, after beating it? Well, I would call this an above-average, conventional yet quirky JRPG that is worth a play. Took me 50 hours to beat it, and I played through with no guide whatsoever, and I didn't really spend any time pursuing optional content in the game. I kind of just stuck to the main quest start to finish. So 50 hours is roughly average for JRPGs. It could be a little long or short depending on who you are. One interesting note in addition is that I kept my PS4 Slim offline for the entire time that I played through this game, and I never had any problems with needing to update anything. That knowledge might be appreciated by someone who doesn't like their video games being too tethered to internet, which is a growing problem nowadays. I do think one of the most interesting facets of this game is that it places the player in the role of an anti-hero at odds with forces that are ostensibly more ethical. Velvet deals with a lot of anger. More than the average character you control in a JRPG for sure. She is dealing with a lot of rage due to things that have happened in her past, and different people will relate to that to different extents, but for me personally, I relate to it a lot because I've struggled with a lot of anger in my life. I'd recommend giving Tales of Berseria a shot. Just know that you're getting into a Tales game that tells a very long story through a lot of cutscenes and skits, but if you want an action JRPG that delivers some quirky and funny character interactions and a kind of dark, unconventional plot, this game might be a good one for you to check out.
Anyway,
Anyway, one night we were having a feast so meowvelous, our souls flew right out of our bodies. That's why I need your help to find the cat spirits and use them to emeowsipate my friends.
Emeowsipate? Really?
It means to use cat spirits to free cats who are locked away in cats' boxes like these here. Meow. Here you'd say apesipate. This one would be edogsipate. And finally...
I'm free, meow.
See? Emeowsipate.
By that logic, shouldn't it be ecatsipate?
Wow, you're way more clever than you look. For real. I guess I totally underestimated you. Please, our cat spirits got scattered far and wide, and so many sad cats are trapped without them.
Seek out the cat spirits and rescue our poor lost brothers and sisters, meow.
And why should I?
Please, think of the cats.
You know, cats have weird and mysterious powers. There's a good chance we might benefit by having them in our debt.
We'll make it worth your while, I promise.
And if we snub them, they might put a curse on us.
That has been known to happen.